Hey, supervisor. My name is Kelly Rathman. I'm a licensed clinical social worker with a private practice, and I also provide clinical supervision to associates who are working towards their hours for licensure. And that's what this channel is about. And these short videos where I like to talk about, what's been coming up for me in the supervision process, what I've been thinking about, themes that tend to arise. Supervision is a big part of my practice. I always have several supervisees and have been supervising, really without break for 10 years now, actually. I'm just realizing, actually, right now that in April of 2016 was when I first started supervising. That's cool. 10 years. Wow. That feels like an accomplishment or something to kind of commemorate for myself here. Um, well, what I wanted to talk about today is endings, and this is like, it's so exciting for us as supervisors when we have our associates who are getting close to being ready for licensure, and then they are ready for licensure. They have accrued all of the hours, the 3,000 plus hours that makes them eligible to take the test. And I really think about this as its own kind of distinct phase of supervision, because the focus changes to, okay, now I've gotten all my hours and now I need to get this paperwork in order. So there's a lot of organizational stuff that can come up here that is easier or harder for different associates depending on who they are, what they got going on. But it does require a lot of organization, like getting your paperwork in order, all of your tracking logs, and getting those experience verification forms signed. For some associates, they didn't get those signed by previous supervisors if they had supervisors at other placements and then or other jobs. I had one supervisee years ago who had 16 different supervisors. Like, that's a lot of paperwork to gather up, and like some of them she had signed like at the time of, and some she didn't, and she needed to go back and like track those supervisors down. I've seen that be really problematic. I've seen with like supervisees who I'm working with where they have to go back and get a previous supervisor's signature on that experience verification form, and the supervisor refuses to do it. Strange. I don't always I don't think I ever really understand why that is. Like, sometimes the supervisor has retired. This still doesn't make any sense to me why they would suddenly decide they weren't going to sign that form. It can be really, really distressing, obviously. So I really encourage supervisees, for the time period that I'm working with them, sometimes I'm working with them all the way to the end, and sometimes I'm working with them just for, while they're at that agency, and then they're moving on to another placement or another job, and they're still needing to accrue their hours. And I'm like, we are going to get your paperwork signed before you go or as you are leaving, but do not leave it for too long, because it's going to be more stressful for you. Like, I'm here. I'm like pretty accessible and easy to find, but also stuff happens. I mean, there's been situations where supervisors died suddenly, and then they had a bunch of supervisees who couldn't get those hours signed. I think the BBS has ways to deal with this, but it's an unnecessary stress. Maybe I'm a little paranoid, but in the past when I've like gone on a trip, I'm like, send me your hours. Like, let me sign off on your hours before I go, just in case something happens to me. Or when I was pregnant with my third child, my youngest, and I was getting ready to go on maternity leave, which I didn't really go on a maternity leave. But I was like getting ready to give birth, and I was like, well, in case something happens, like, get me your hours. Let me sign off on everything. I remember one of my supervisees like gave me this horrified look, like what? Like it just brought into her awareness that maybe I could like suddenly die. So that was its own thing that I had to then attend to, because I was not trying to do any fear mongering, but it was just like I don't want to leave stuff unattended. I don't want to leave paperwork unsigned. I want us to be on top of this and take care of it. And I have seen supervisees who like don't really want to think about it. They don't want to think about getting their paperwork signed. They just kind of want to put their head down and do the work. And then at the end they'll get everything signed. And it's not a great plan, in my opinion, personally. So I don't really understand why other supervisors say, oh, I'll sign all of that. I'll sign that experience verification form when you're done with all your hours. To me, if they have ended their supervisory relationship, those forms need to be signed. They need to be signed. And I think this is easier for the supervisor as well. Like, come on, we move on with our lives. I take on other supervisees. I don't want to be burdened with paperwork from the past. Come on, I want to get it done now. So anyways, all of that can be really anxiety producing, right? And then there's this awareness that associates then have, which is, oh, I need to like study for the test. Like my focus has been on just getting these hours done and expanding my, clinical skills and, knowing what I'm doing. But now I have to pass a test. And it's like, it's so common for supervisees to suddenly feel like they know nothing. And I feel like I have to remind them, like, no, you've done the hours. You have put in the hours that are required of you. And yes, you have to pass this test. The test is not the kind of end all be all about your knowledge. You just got to learn how to pass this test. And there are wonderful materials, like the Therapist Development Center is great, has really good materials. I have had so many supervisees who've been so successful passing their test, who felt really held and supported by their materials and how it moves them through the content so that they're ready for the test. So I feel like they need a reminder, like, you do know what you're doing because you've been doing it. And if it really comes down to it on the test, with a question that you're like, I don't know the answer to, you ask yourself, well, what would I actually do? Do I have any point of reference in my actual experience that would tell me what I would do? So just really reminding them that they know more than they think that they know, because in that moment they seem to forget. And I'm like, come on, you've spent at least 3 years getting these hours and working, if not more. I've had plenty of supervisees who are really pushing up against that 6-year mark. So they've had even longer, even more experience. I think the other thing that kind of comes up, so there's this like new chapter of anxiety around, I need to pass this test. And I think there's this fear, like, if I don't pass the test, well, like, then what am I going to do? Like, is all of this for nothing? And it's like, no. Or they get scared about the paperwork, the application to the BBS. Well, what if I don't have the paperwork right? Like, what if I miss something? What if they reject it? I have found that with the few supervisees, I mean, I've had a ton of supervisees. I've had 3 supervisees that have had the initial, they haven't gotten approved right away with their paperwork. And the reason was they were missing a form, or there was a date that was incorrect on there that the BBS caught. And then they asked us to correct it, and they asked us to, write a letter attesting, like, why was this mistake made? And so we've done that and sent it back, and it was approved the next day, like really fast. They're not trying to keep supervisees from getting licensed. Like, they're not trying to catch you out on something, but they're going to look at that paperwork, and they're going to make sure everything's in order and that those dates all make sense and that you have really done your due diligence and you've really gotten those hours. But it's not the end of the world if they don't approve it right away. And then the next thing is, okay, so they approve your hours and now you have to schedule your test. And I usually kind of coach my associates to like, don't push it out too far and also don't make it too soon. But around a month or two at the most is usually kind of a good time span to really kind of focus on your studying and then get that test done and get it out of the way. And if you don't pass the test, you have to wait 90 days and then you can take the test again. So I recently, actually just today, I was so delighted because I got an email from one of my former supervisees where we had finished our work together, and so we were done, but she had not taken her test yet. Like, she was actually just going to then start doing her paperwork and applying to the BBS and such. And she just emailed me today to say that she had passed the test and she had been issued her license, and she even sent me a picture of her license issued by the BBS of California. And I just I'm so touched when my former supervisees reach out to me. They want to tell me that they did it, and they thank me and just share some appreciation, which is like so lovely. They don't have to do that, but it really fills me up. I'm really moved by that. I mean, that's like why we're doing this as supervisors, right? Like, we are trying to support clinicians, new clinicians coming into this work. And I think a lot of the work that we do as supervisors is helping them manage their anxiety. Like, it's okay. So many aspects of this process feel like so high stakes, and people have put in their time. They've paid a lot of money for grad school. They've put in a lot of hours to graduate, to do their traineeships, their internships, to then work in associateships. They're often not making very much money. Like, there's a lot of sacrifice that's going into this process. So when it gets to the end, it does feel really, really high stakes. And they think that they're going to be the one who did it wrong. They're going to be the one where the BBS is going to be like, no, you're an imposter, And it's like, our job as supervisors is to be like, no, what you're going through is totally normal. You're going to be fine. And you just have to continue to take this step by step and remind yourself that you actually do know what you're doing here. So I think the other thing that comes up, so there's a lot of managing of anxiety, and it's like a different kind of anxiety from the initial phases of supervision. Like, I think of supervision, I think of it on like a developmental kind of continuum. And so we're always kind of managing anxiety, but what the anxiety is and what's driving it is different in each phase of a new clinician's kind of journey through their associateship. And when we're at the end, there's the imposter, or maybe I'm not good enough, or maybe this was all for naught and I'm not going to pass and everything's going to fall apart. There's like some catastrophic thinking that can happen. Maybe I'm going to get licensed, but then what am I going to do if I want to start a private practice? How do I do that? And I'm scared, right? There's just a lot of fear that comes up. Like, I don't know if I want to do this on my own. I've been relying on supervision and I've been getting this support from, most associates, unless they're in a private practice associateship, are in an agency. So they're getting administrative support. They're getting peer support, they're getting group supervision, they're getting individual supervision. There's a lot of structure around them, holding them. And then when they get licensed, we're all like, you're good. Like, you can sometimes stay in the organization and keep working, but many people won't, because it usually just doesn't pay enough. So there's often this feeling of like, I'm like a baby bird and I'm getting kicked out of the nest and I'm like, not ready. I don't know if I can fly yet, And this is just so normal and so common. And I feel like this is what I do. I do a lot of talking about this with my supervisees who are really on the precipice of getting licensed. And it's kind of funny, in the last month, I've had 3 supervisees who I've been working with for a few years, and who all came up to right around the same time, like within the same month. They all finished their hours. They were all submitting their hours. 2 were social workers and 1 was an MFT. So the BBS processes those at different. They have a different timeline for processing those, and you can like go on Facebook and see what week the BBS is processing applications from. So we were like all watching this and kind of tracking and seeing who got their approval first. And 2 of my supervisees passed their test the first time, so happy for them. One of them unfortunately didn't, and they found out they had not passed by 2 points. So disappointing. And there's a lot of emotion that comes up after a supervisee doesn't pass their test. Again, this hasn't happened very often for me, but it maybe a couple times. And I think a lot of feeling that comes up is like, oh, I'm not cut out for this, or they feel stupid. And it's like, all sorts of reasons contribute to why people don't pass the test. A lot of it's test anxiety, and a lot of it is, folks who struggle like with focus. If they have ADHD, sitting for 4 hours is really hard. It's really hard. Like, that is a big ask, to sit for 4 hours and answer questions and stay really focused. So we debriefed, what do you think contributed to not passing? What do you think you're going to need to prepare for, 90 days from now when you take it again? And just a lot of reassurance, like, this is just part of the journey. You're going to get there. This is not the end. But it's hard. It's hard to face that if you don't pass the test the first time. And I remind them, like, you're not the only one who hasn't passed the test the first time, and nobody is going to judge you for that. And when you do pass the test and you are licensed and you're off in your career, nobody's going to ask you, did you pass the test the first time? Like, clients don't even know or care about like our process of getting licensed. And I've never had a colleague ask me that. I think it's just really, the worst when it's in the moment when it's happening, and you've got friends and family who know you're taking the test and they're rooting for you, and then it's disappointing. But it's like, you're going to get past this, and it's going to be history. And then you're going to continue on, and this is not going to define your career by any stretch. I think the other thing that sometimes comes up, and this, I think a lot about supervision from a psychodynamic perspective, meaning the relationship is really important to me. I think having a safe relationship in supervision is what allows my supervisees to be really honest and really candid about what they're experiencing, and they're willing to share the vulnerable aspects of learning to be a therapist. And it's so vulnerable. It really is. And I think it's really important I think it's an imperative that we share those vulnerabilities with supervisors, so that they can not judge you. It's not about evaluating you. We evaluate your work, of course, but to me, that's a strength if you know what your vulnerabilities are, and you're willing to be kind of insecure sometimes and be like, I'm struggling with this, right? If you're coming to supervision and you're like, everything's great and I have no issues and I totally know what I'm doing, that is way more concerning to me, because I don't believe you. I'm a pretty seasoned therapist, and I still have insecurities, and I still have things I run into. Of course I still need consultation. Like, this stuff doesn't end, So that being said, the relationships that I form with a lot of my supervisees are, they're really personal. There's a closeness. And it's like, it's this very unique relationship, right? Like, I'm not their therapist, and I'm not their friend, and I'm not their boss, it's like a mentorship, really. And you can get really close, caring relationships with your mentors and your mentees. You know, we end up genuinely caring about each other as people. And so there's like sometimes there's just some sadness with ending. You know, this is a person who you've seen every week, you know, sometimes for years. And you really get to know people when you see someone every week. Like, I don't see my best friends every week for an hour consistently. You know, we talk to each other, we're texting or whatever, but like, this is dedicated, connected time every week for an hour with this person. So that being said, there's some sadness, and you know, the termination or the ending has to be processed, and there's an acknowledgement of a renegotiation of that relationship. And I think that can look different for different supervisors and for different supervisees, kind of depending on how good the fit is or how close you got. Some supervisees I've stayed close with after they became licensed, and we've become more like, you know, colleagues, right? The relationship changes. Some they just check in every once in a while to give me an update. They'll send me an email to let me know. But for me, what I offer is like, I'm here for you. You know, I'm not in the same way. I'm not going to be seeing you every week anymore. But if you want consultation, you can reach out to me. If you just want to reach out and have a hi, check in, like, let's have a coffee date, let's talk about what's going on, I would love that. I'd be so honored, you know. So I offer that, and I kind of leave it in their court to decide, because there is a power differential in supervision. And so I don't feel like I can be driving that and saying like, let's be friends, or, you know, let's stay in touch. I feel like that kind of needs to be up to them. And then with some of my former supervisees where we have kind of stayed in touch and the relationship has changed and we're more like colleagues, and sometimes we're kind of still working in the same circles, and so we overlap sometimes, like then I don't feel so bad about being like, oh hey, do you want to catch up and get coffee or chat or something like that. But keeping it very, very casual and really with no pressure whatsoever. I mean, and then the other thing that I think about is like, I notice for myself that sometimes I'm much more ready than they are, because I've been with them on this journey towards licensure, and I sort of I can feel like, okay, my job is done here. Like I've been with you, I've supervised these hours, like you're ready to take your test. And I can feel sometimes like when their anxiety comes up, that sometimes I'm a little like maybe misattuned to it, or not as open to it. And this is for me, this is like my stuff to kind of look at. And for other supervisors, if this comes up for you, to kind of look at it. And I think about it as like, oh, you're good, like bye, like I'm pushing you out of the nest, go fly, like I'm done basically. And I have to look at what's going on for me there. You know, is it that I'm just so confident in them that I'm like, you're fine, it wouldn't even cross my mind that you wouldn't pass your test and that you're not going to like go off and be totally successful? Is it that there was some mismatch and I'm like maybe a little burnt out and I'm like, okay, I'm done, we're good, goodbye? Is it not about the relationship, but I am maybe burnt out because I'm working a lot, and so I'm like, okay, that's check that off the list, like that person's done. Okay, I'm focusing on the other folks I've got. Or, you know, I have people like waiting, you know, from some of my agencies that I am contracted with. They're like, we've got another one on deck for you. So then it's like my focus is moving on. I'm like, you're licensed, you're good, I'm moving on to the next person. So that's something I really have to pay attention to, because I'm not carrying the anxiety, you know. And so sometimes I can sort of, you know, I guess I can sort of miss it sometimes. And I really need to pay attention that there's a lot happening in those last couple months, when they've gotten their hours approved, they're waiting to take the test, they've taken the test, or they're about to take the test, there's a lot that can come up emotionally and relationally. And sometimes, I keep labeling it as anxiety that's in the supervisee, and maybe that's, that's very psychodynamic of me, but maybe you would name it something else. But I think that's what's like getting managed at that time. And sometimes it shows up not so obvious. So sometimes there will be like a dynamic that shows up, or there'll be a problem that happens that comes up. And you're like, well, this is weird. Like, we haven't really had any problems or issues or complications recently. And there can be something that shows up that's kind of out of the blue. And then I look at it and I'm like, oh, something's getting acted out here that's about their anxiety about getting licensed. Like, stuff is getting stirred up. And I shouldn't just say it's about them, because it's me too, right? Like, in the way that I might be like, okay, we're moving towards being done, they might be signaling to me like, I still have some needs here. Like, Kelly, you're not done with me yet. Like, I still have time with you, and I still need to sort some stuff out. So I have to pay attention to that and really, honor that and identify it accurately and stay attuned and not be sort of signing off too soon, I guess. I think that's one of the things that kind of comes up for me. So I realize this is a long one today. Those are my thoughts. I think there's so much more to say about endings and all the different ways that supervisees end too. Like, sometimes we're ending and it's not because they're done with their hours, it's because of other things happening. And that'll just have to be a different video. So those are my thoughts for today. I hope that something was useful here for you, or interesting, or thought-provoking, something that's going to help you reflect in your own supervision practice. And as always, I'm open to feedback and thoughts and things I missed. I love this work and I love talking about it. And anything I say here is not the end all be all, and it's not exhaustive. It's just what's happening for me right now. So thank you so much for your time, and be well. Take care. Bye.